1, 2, 3, 4.
Hi everyone, this is Jewish Talk coming to you from NASA Community College on 90.3 WHBC, also streaming on the iHeart and the iTunes app. This program is later archived on Spreaker.com. So hi there, my name is Rabbi Perl. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. This all depends on when you're listening or joining us. Every human being has a relationship with the divine. Prayer, speaking to God, or asking God for help, is a universal phenomenon. Furthermore, God makes demands of each human being through the 7 Noahide laws, and on each person, man and woman, through the 613 mitzvahs. The key moment in the relationship between God and every one of us took place at Mount Sinai, when God was revealed to every individual in unprecedented way. In fact, that event is the basis of all Jewish law, including the universal Noahide laws. But how do we know what the laws are and how they are to be applied? At Mount Sinai, there was an intense experience, and we heard the 10 Commandments. The details of how to keep the Sabbath or kosher or any other aspect of Jewish teachings comes through a chain of transmission. Described in the beginning of the Ethics of the Fathers, where we read, Moses received the Torah at Mount Sinai. He transmitted it to Joshua, Joshua to the elders, and the elders to the prophets, and so on. So eventually the Torah teachings have reached us. The step in which Moses transmitted his authority to Joshua as the single leader and guide of the Jewish people is found in chapter 27 of Numbers. However, earlier in the book of Numbers, there was another famous step of transmission from Moses. This was the establishment of the Sanhedrin, 70 elders who share the responsibility of leadership. The background of founding of the Sanhedrin was a new outburst of complaints by the Jewish people. Let's go to the context. Why do they have to eat only manna? Couldn't they have meat? This was the complaint, as we read this week. The Torah describes Moses saying to God that he cannot cope with them anymore. He needs help. At this, God responds that Moses should gather 70 elders and stand with them at the Sanhedrin. Then God would speak to Moses and transfer some of his spirit to the elders so that they too will share in the responsibility of leadership. The sages discussed the question of whether or not this transfer diminished Moses in any way. Sometimes a teacher might reach down so far towards his pupils that he himself gets dragged down. However, Rashi presents the image that Moses was like a candle on a candlestick from which all are able to light. This conveys the idea that all can take a flame, but the original candle is not diminished. Moses was the greatest of all prophets, and therefore had the power to give illumination to all without being adversely affected. Indeed, when 2 extra people, apart from the 70 of the Sanhedrin, became obviously inspired, Moses said, let the whole group, the whole people be granted the divine spirit. The Lubavitcher Rebbe points out that Rashi does not say that only the members of the Sanhedrin take a flame from Moses' candle. He said all. There is a sense in which every one of us did this and continues to do so throughout time. And so the chain of rabbis define the Torah laws, but each and every one of us discovers his or her own reality in their subtle depths. The Sanhedrin became the channel for communicating the Torah teachings to the Jewish people. Through the generations, teachings later transmitted through the Mishnah, the Talmud, and the Code of Law. This process gives illumination to all, to the Torah and the teachings to every one of us. Now, the Torah portion, discusses kindling of the menorah. Here's something fascinating. The Talmud says that when the oil was made for the use in the service in the Holy Temple, olives were squeezed 3 times. The oil of each pressing was divided into 3 quality levels. The first level of the first pressing was supreme, and it was used for the kindling of the menorah. The second oil of the first pressing and the first oil of the second pressing were of equal grade and could be used for the meal offerings. But only the first oil of the second pressing could be used for the menorah, and not the second oil of the first pressing. The third oil of the first pressing and the second oil of the second pressing and the first oil of the third pressing were all equal for meal offerings, but only the first oil of the third pressing could be used for the menorah. Why should the first oil of the third pressing have a priority for the kindling of the menorah over the second and third oil of the first pressing? See, all people are not alike. Some people have better faculties and some poorer. King Solomon says a man's soul is the candle of God, and all the details connected with the menorah contain teachings which apply to a person's life. The teaching of the different levels of oil is that God does not expect one person to be like another person, but he does expect him to achieve his utmost. Therefore, if he's capable of being on the highest level, he may not suffice with being second. On the other hand, if he has the capabilities of only being of the second level, and he exceeds in that, his achievements equals that of one who is the uppermost in the first level. It is related that the famous pious person Rabbi Zusha once said, "When I come before the heavenly tribunal, I'm not afraid they're going to demand of me why wasn't Zusha like our patriarch Abraham, but I'm afraid lest they ask me why wasn't Zusha as Zusha could have been." Let's continue. I've never yet been tempted to burn down a school building, God forbid, nor do I follow fire trucks, but I admit to a lifetime fascination with fire. I don't know why, but the dancing flames, the interplay of subtle different hues of light, and the heat produced as wood slowly smolders has always had me enthralled. You think about this. I certainly picked the religion with sufficient outlets to satisfy my attraction. Think about this. How many of our festivals and observances revolve around the kindling of flame? Offhand, I think of what comes to mind is Friday night candles, the Havdalah service marking the conclusion of Shabbos, Hanukkah candles, Lag BaOmer bonfires, the burning of leaven chametz before Pesach, not to mention the baking of matzahs, lighting candles the night before the bris, and of course the lantern-bearing procession to the wedding canopy. Apparently, there's a psychologically recognized condition. It's called seasonally affected disorder, SAD. Seasonally affected disorder, where people become depressed in winter due to the lack of sunlight. The presence of light and fire in all their brilliance, warmth, and beauty directly influences our feelings of health and contentment. In the Torah, we read about the divine command for the high priest to kindle the 7-branched candelabra. The temple was the source of splendor and enlightenment for the physical world, and the priest's responsibility was to ignite these flames of the glory and thereby illuminate the universe. We have a similar mission in our daily struggles in this gloomy world, to transmit the radiance of God from within ourselves, to brighten our surroundings and illuminate the lives of our families, of our friends, and our acquaintances. Aaron was commanded to light the wicks until the fire blazes up by itself. As anyone who has ever battled a coal barbecue or labored to start a campfire without fire starters or kerosene would attest, there is more to kindling than just holding a match to the fuel. It takes skill to find the right spot, determination to keep the lighter there until the fire catches, and sometimes it takes a few tries and a half dozen matches to guarantee that the flame will spread. Once well lit, the new fire is incomparably more powerful and usually than just simply the original matchstick that was originally used to ignite that fire. So what I'm saying is, it's not easy to reach out to others. We often feel shy or awkward, worried about interfering, and unconvinced of our ability to be of any use. Far easier to hide in one's own little huddle and let the world take care of itself. We can't. We mustn't. The exponential effects of inspiring others, the good engendered, and the inspiration affected have such powerful consequences, and to abnegate our responsibilities should be to condemn both ourselves and others to a very sterile, frosty existence. Nobody wants to play the Indian. We all want to be the chief. The maids of honor are only in the picture to complement the bride. It's obvious the head man gets all the rank and prestige, and the bride gets all the presents. There's no shame in wanting to stride first through, the red carpet of life. But for better or worse, some people do need to hang back in the processional. So you see, the Jewish people were on their long trek to the promised land. And contrary to popular belief, there was no unruly mob resentfully squabbling their way through the desert. But really, it was a highly motivated and organized nation marching in military formation and in an orderly succession. The princely tribe of Judah marched at the front with all the due pomp and circumstances. Followed them were the holy Levites, bearer of the tabernacles, together with the high and mighty firstborn tribes. Bringing up the rear, last and possibly least, was the grouping that belonged to the tribe of Dan. Remarkably, the Dans, those from the tribe of Dan, were the only regimental division to be honored with a description of purpose. Because the Torah actually tells us, what their job was? They were Ma'asiv Kolavachles. The tribe of Dan were the collectors. Though it sounds like a rock band or an obsessive group of rare coin fanatics, the title collectors reflects their unique position in social order. With hundreds of thousands of persons packing up and breaking camp simultaneously, it was inevitable that some items of value would be inadvertently left behind. So the job of these back-end tribes was to collect those valuables and restore them back to their owners. In fact, this remarkable facility for cleaning up after themselves may very well explain why so little overt evidence has ever been found of our ancestors' sojourn through the desert, because everything was picked up, nothing was left behind. There are those who live in their lives in the fast lane, striding off imperviously into the sunset, never looking back, not worrying about those who fall behind. Others live more circumstancing. Not for them the bold gestures or the over-hasty decision. They live their lives for others and are there to pick up the pieces when you fall. When it comes to deciding on one's future career, career path, it is tempting to imagine your name up in the lights, headlining the show and earning all the applause. But from the Torah's perspective, there's much to be admired about those who stand back, ready to shoulder the load for others. Somewhere out there are people who need your help. If you are too focused on your own journey, you won't hear their cry nor feel their pain. We have to be ready and waiting for the opportunity to help others, even at the cost of our own self-gratification. The leaders may get the kudos, but the real heroes of life are those quiet collectors at the rear. Do you, by the way, do you get coffee withdrawal headaches on Yom Kippur? Do you feel lonely every time you misplace your mobile phone? Do you find yourself checking your email 20 times a day and compulsively Googling the details of new acquaintances? You know you're overdoing it, don't you? But you have no idea how to stop. Well, a good cup of coffee is relaxing, just as a mobile phone is a real time saver. The web is a boon for mankind, and Silicon Valley richly deserves our thanks. But none of these should come at the expense of our self-control. Surely such luxuries were invented for our convenience and pleasure, not as instruments of oppression. So how do you regain control? You go cold turkey for a while. Break the habit and just stop indulging. Clear the caffeine out of your system. Disconnect the batteries and communicate by snail mail. It will hurt for a while. You will find yourself loitering in front of cafes, just sniffing the fumes. Every time a phone rings, your trigger hand will clutch vainly for your holster, and you'll miss the instancy of the instant messaging. But you'll be all the better for the experience. After a few weeks, once the cravings have died down, you'll be able to ease yourself back into the saddle, secure in the knowledge that you've conquered your demons, and you're now free to enjoy and benefit from the pleasures of life again. This time, of course, in moderation. Passover is all about avoidance and self-control. Heaven forbid that a bagel should show up at a Seder. Hoi gewalt. Matzah, and only matzah is the bill of fare. We spend weeks tracking down the most minute particle of bread and disposing of it. Forbidden, verboten, totally unacceptable. Just a few weeks later, we observe the second Passover. Let me tell you, originally enacted as a make-up opportunity for those who missed Passover. Nowadays, we commemorate the day by making sure to indulge in some matzah. But simultaneously, we are permitted bread and other chametz at the table. So in Hasidic terminology, bread and similar leaven is said to represent a puffed up sense of self-worth. Avoiding chametz on Pesach is analogous to swearing off arrogance and ego. It's dangerous to overdose on conceit, addictive in the extreme, and liable to distract a person from his or her true purpose. So we take the pledge and do whatever we can to eradicate vanity from our system. However, there is a time and place for a healthy dose of self-esteem and self-respect. It takes confidence to stand up straight when others stoop, to follow the path less traveled, and maintain feelings for our religion despite the slings of scoffers. The second Passover represents a more mature perspective on life. Having battled over our addictions and come out on the other side, we can now afford to gain from our pain and utilize which was previously forbidden. So by serving matzah and bread together on second Passover, we demonstrate our success in having overcome our obsessions and cravings, and our newfound ability to sublimate our desires. Now that the addiction has been defeated, we can begin to enjoy and employ the luxuries of life in our service of the Almighty God. So, dear friends, so much to talk about, so many ideas and concepts, and it's of course important for us to keep in mind all these many lessons and all these kinds of insights of life as well, and the world around us, and many aspects for us to really make a difference in our lives in so many different ways. I do have to discuss something of great importance to all of us as well. And that is, when a young couple get married, get engaged, we observe there's an interesting ritual. When the bride-to-be tells her friends of her engagement, they all dissolve into fits of happiness, telling her how lucky she is, and even that they're a little jealous of her. Guys, on the other hand, typically get the following reactions when they tell their friends that they're getting married. What a pity. You're really going to suffer now. You don't know what you're getting into, and so on. And these comments don't come from the bachelor friends either. On the contrary, they come from the married guys who make such a fuss that it seems that their entire married lives are one long pain. Listening to such men makes one think that perhaps someone forced them to get married, as if policemen literally came to their doors and dragged them to the wedding hall against their will. Now, my heart just goes out to these guys. They really suffer. They have wives to take care of their homes, raise their children, make them warm meals, and worst of all, they have to take the garbage out once a day, and even that they don't always do. The wives, on the other hand, work hard, and they are happily married, yet their husbands talk like they're being abused. I have yet to hear of a shelter for abused husbands. The bottom line, my dear friends, is that it all depends on which glasses you wear when you look at life. In this week's Torah portion, we read about how Moses himself complained that he no longer had the strength to be the leader, and he lamented to God, "Did I give birth to them? Did I need to suffer from them?" In response, God told him, as I mentioned, he selected 70 elders, and he continued on, and they would help him. Indeed, Moshe selected 70 elders and gathered them around his tent. Now let's picture this scene for a moment. It's the biggest inauguration ceremony you can imagine. Even when one single rabbi is formally installed, the whole ceremony and celebration is held. Here, there have to be 70 leaders inaugurated, and they were about to receive no less than the spiritual power of prophecy. So, of course, everyone came to the inauguration. The elders' wives, their children and grandchildren, their teachers, their aunts, their uncles and cousins. It was like a high school or college graduation where every family member and friend you could think of shows up, and all are busy snapping pictures from start to finish. Naturally, there was also a VIP seating section. In the front row, there were the communal leaders, beginning with Moshe Rabbeinu. Next to him was seated Aaron, the high priest, and Miriam. Next to him was seated Zipporah, Moshe's wife, as Rashi tells us. But it gets better. The Medrash tells us that the Jews lit candles and celebrated for them, meaning they created a festive atmosphere. And then Miriam herself goes up to speak in honor of the event. She said, "Happy are the wives of these men who were appointed leaders of the community." Can you imagine? Unbelievable. Miriam, who was the prophetess in her own right, essentially told the crowd, what a merit these women have to have husbands who have become prophets. In 1 second, they turned into very important people. She's so-and-so's, wife. But Zipporah, who had been sitting next to Miriam, suddenly said, "Woe to the wives of these men, because from the day the divine presence settles upon them, he has abstained from me." Zipporah obviously had a totally different view of the entire matter. She therefore whispered to Miriam so that no one would hear, but there was no honor at all. From the time her husband Moshe became a prophet, he never came home. Miriam turns to her brother and told him what she had heard. They continued with a discussion. Was it only Moshe that God spoke to? Did God not speak to us too? And yet we don't separate from our spouses. In other words, God did speak to Miriam and Aaron in prophecy too, and yet they continue with their family lives. So why did Moses need to completely abstain from his wife? What really happened there? The Talmud tells us there were 3 decisions in Moshe Rabbeinu's history that he undertook with his own volition. And that is, in preparation for the Torah at Mount Sinai, he added an extra day of preparation. Number 2, Moshe came down the mountain after 40 days with the sin of the golden calf, and we all know he broke the tablets. He didn't ask God what to do. He simply came up with it from himself. And God agreed. He did the right thing. Yasher koyach for breaking the tablets. And the third thing is mentioned in our Torah. Moshe decided that since God spoke to him constantly, unlike other prophets who had to schedule, so to speak, a meeting with God, he never knew when God would suddenly start speaking to him. He therefore decided to be in a state of readiness at all times to speak with God. So he decided to abstain from his wife. And here too, God agreed with his decision. So now, what exactly is Miriam's problem? Why did she mention Moshe's abstinence to Aaron? Was she simply gossiping? It doesn't make sense to say that about such a great prophetess like Miriam. She was not an ordinary woman. She certainly appreciated how great Moshe Rabbeinu truly was. So we must say that Miriam and Aaron had a very important goal in mind. And that's why they talked about it, because it was important to them not to gossip, but rather what we call shalom bayis, domestic harmony, love and peace between husband and wife. Now, how do we know that shalom bayis, peace, was so important to both of them? Many of us have heard of the story of Miriam as a little girl, how she convinced her parents who had divorced to remarry each other. At that time, Pharaoh made a decree, and so her parents stopped living. They divorced, so they shouldn't have any more children. And she's the one who encouraged them to get back together. And of course, the point is here that Aaron is also a peacekeeper. How do we know that Aaron, right? We say that Aaron was a person who was oyev shalom v'roidev shalom. He loved peace and genuine peace. So what do we see with his life? That here was a high priest who would personally run about in the community making peace between husbands and wives. So of course, with these two heard that Moshe had been abstaining from Zipporah, it really hurt them. They wanted to correct this. But here God himself intervened and said to them, I speak to Moshe directly, meaning to say, if Moshe is so great a person that God speaks to him directly, personally, then he certainly knows what he's doing. And of such a person, the Rebbe, a Rebbe does not want to ask any questions. Nevertheless, the essential concern of Miriam and Aaron remains correct and legitimate. That's why we remember every day what Miriam did, mentioning it at the end of the morning prayers, because it's not just a negative reminder that Miriam spoke gossip, but a positive reminder of how important peace in the home is and how far we have to go to help shalom bayis come about, peace between husband and wife, between people, and surely in the world that we live in today, bringing peace amongst people and recognition of everyone's role in this world is something so important to all of us. This is your host, Rabbi Perl, wishing you a wonderful weekend. Enjoy the week and looking forward to continuing our conversation.